It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Trouble coming down the pipeline. The boss of Thames Water warns that bills could rise by 40% as the company tries to stay afloat. We show you the leaked documents and secret recordings which shed new light on the operations of the Post Office at the height of the Horizon scandal. The rise and fall of the crypto king, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, sentenced to 25 years for one of the biggest financial frauds in US history. Also tonight, 45 people die in a bus crash in South Africa, with an 8-year-old child the only survivor.
Future Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Doubling down on levelling up, Keir Starmer praises Boris Johnson's pet project, but accuses Rishi Sunak of strangling it at birth. Oppenheimer director Christopher Nolan is made a knight, and his producer wife Emma a dame in a new honours list. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. The timing was less than ideal, just one day after figures revealed a sharp rise in sewage spills by water companies. But today, the chief executive of Thames Water refused to rule out bill increases of up to 40% for customers as the troubled company tries to secure its future. The business, which serves nearly a quarter of the UK's population, is struggling with billions of pounds of debt and has repeatedly missed its sewage spill and leakage targets. Well, the Community Secretary, Michael Gove, a former Environment Minister, said that the leadership of Thames Water had been a disgrace. Paul Kelso has this report.
For months, Thames Water has faced a sea of troubles.
Thames Water has apologised for these ongoing issues.
A poor record on leaks and on sewage contamination.
The company was fined more than £32 million.
We understand that our performance has not been good enough.
Now Britain's biggest water company could become the largest failure of privatisation. A standoff between the company and regulator Ofwat has seen shareholders pull the plug on a multi-billion-pound investment, and the boss scrambling to reassure customers it can stay afloat.
We want to get to a business case that is in the best interests of customers. It is affordable for them, but it is also financeable for Thames Water and investable for our shareholders.
Thames's problem is it's drowning in debt that it's struggling to afford. More than £15 billion has been piled onto the regulated company since privatisation, some of it funding investment in infrastructure, while bills actually remained relatively low. But £7 billion has been paid out in dividends to shareholders, almost £3 billion of that to Australian bank Macquarie in the 2010s. Now, the current owners, including British and Canadian pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, haven't taken an external dividend since they took control in 2017, but they do want a return on their investment at some point, and that now depends on the outcome of negotiations with the regulator Ofwat. Thames says it needs to spend £20 billion upgrading pipes and sewers, and it wants even more money from the shareholders to pay for it. They had agreed to provide £3.75 billion, starting with £500 million this month, but only if Thames agreed concessions with Ofwat, including putting up bills by 40% and lower fines for sewage spills. So far, Ofwat has refused, leaving the company, in its own words, uninvestable. Now, Thames says it's got enough money to trade until next May, but if it can't agree a deal that's attractive to investors, it will fall into special administration, effectively nationalisation. Privately, ministers are preparing for this, but publicly, they're blaming the company.
Well, I think the leadership of Thames Water has been a disgrace. I think for years now, we've seen the customers of Thames Water taken advantage of. The answer is not to hit the consumers. The answer is for the management team to look to their own approach and ask themselves why they're in this difficult situation. And of course, the answer is because of serial mismanagement for which they must carry the can.
In Tooting, South London, residents would like the hole in the road fixed before they're asked to repair the finances.
Quite upset and annoyed, actually, yeah, because they don't seem to be providing a very good service at all at the moment.
For the amount that they're charging at the moment, I don't think that they should be putting it up, because it's what we're already paying for is supposed to be for the sewage and for cleaning and making sure that everything is okay.
Their shareholders are receiving dividends of ludicrous amounts of money. I don't really see what extra service we're getting for this 40% rise.
The next few months will determine whether Thames and the privatised water model is beyond repair. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Sky News has seen evidence that more than £1 million of unexplained transactions were transferred into a post office account at the height of the Horizon scandal, when sub-postmasters were using their own money to keep their accounts correct. We've also heard recordings of conversations between auditors and civil servants, which suggests those investigating the accounting problems at the post office were gagged to stop them discussing their findings with MPs. Our business correspondent Adele Robinson reports.
Where did this money come from? It didn't come out of thin air.
More than £1 million of unexplained transactions going into post office profit at the height of the Horizon scandal.
These were large amounts being taken to the credit of the profit and loss account without proper investigation.
Leaked documents given to Sky News show unaccounted for money between 2007 and 2010, raising questions: did some of this come from sub-postmasters' pockets, wrongly forced to pay shortfalls in their branches?
We just don't know because of the lack of granularity. But Post Office was not printing money; it was accumulating funds in its suspense account. Those funds belonged to somebody, either to third-party clients or to sub-postmasters. And part of the work that Ron Warmington and I were doing in 2015 was drilling into that. We were starting to make progress, but that was when we were sacked.
Ian Henderson's from Second Sight, the independent forensic accountants brought in to investigate the scandal a decade ago.
I can see from this letter here, which is dated 13th of February, and it's from Alistair Cameron, Chief Financial Officer for Post Office.
In this letter, Post Office admits transactions are not always clear and cannot be traced.
At best, this is the Post Office mismanaging its finances. Usually, well-run organisations like banks clear their suspense accounts over a few days, not months or years. But at worst, this may be money from sub-postmasters who personally made up shortfalls, ending up in Post Office profits.
It's my money. They deduct it from my salary. I mean, we're talking about £2 or £20,000.
Meanwhile, Seema Misra, wrongly convicted by Post Office and jailed whilst pregnant, still hasn't had her money back.
They took the money and they used that money, which wasn't. It's my money. If I put that in the saving account or something, I would have got the interest back on it. It's like terrible. They're playing not just people's money, people's emotions.
Second Sight say they were sacked by Post Office after asking questions about accounts. Now, new tapes of secret recordings given to Sky News may mark where the relationship began to go wrong.
Either, we have unfettered discretion and authorisation to talk to MPs, or we haven't. At the moment, the way the document is drafted, we are prevented from doing that. That's the issue.
Yes.
In a meeting in 2014, Second Sight colleagues Ron Warmington and Ian Henderson are speaking with a lawyer and a senior figure brought in by Post Office, concerned they're being blocked from talking to MPs.
My point is, we should not be gagging either the applicant or Second Sight in being able to respond, fully and frankly to MPs who, frankly, sort of set this whole process in motion.
The Post Office representative replies saying they're not trying to gag anybody.
If later it emerges that a document has effectively gagged Second Sight in its dealings with the MPs, and they later find out about it, it's not going to be Second Sight they're particularly annoyed with, it's going to be Post Office.
The Post Office representative says they think that's something the Post Office will have to deal with if it arises. Post Office, meanwhile, say the public inquiry with the power to question under oath is the best forum to examine the issues. But at the same time these tapes were recorded, sub-postmasters were still being wrongly prosecuted. Another revelation and more undoubtedly to come. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Well, Adele joins me now. So secret recordings then obtained by you, but also a document made public which shows that the Post Office knew that its court defence was false.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually a document that's been published on the Post Office Public Inquiry website. It's nearly 150 pages. It's from Deloitte and it's from 2017. It looked at various things, including Horizon documents, transaction data. It interviewed Fujitsu staff, Post Office staff. And what it shows is that the Post Office had evidence in 2017 that accounting losses could be due to Horizon errors or remote access from Fujitsu staff. So 2017. Now, bear in mind that the Post Office spent nearly £100 million taking sub-postmasters, fighting sub-postmasters in the High Court between 2018 and 2019. Remember, that was the Mr Bates versus Post Office Limited litigation in the High Court. And they maintained throughout that sub-postmasters were guilty of theft, of mistakes, of false accounting. And also, what is apparent, this document was shared with Post Office management and with investigators. Crucially as well, from a legal standpoint, the very existence of the report was not disclosed to sub-postmasters or the court itself. The next phase of the inquiry, though, is in the next 2 weeks, and we expect more revelations in the next couple of weeks before then, I imagine.
OK, more, obviously, as that develops. Adele, thank you. Now, in a matter of years, Sam Bankman-Fried became one of America's richest people, courted by the great and good of business, entertainment and politics. He made millions as founder of the cryptocurrency exchange, FTX, which was worth $40 billion before its collapse 2 years ago. And today, SBF, as he's known, was jailed for 25 years for stealing billions in what prosecutors called one of the biggest financial frauds in US history. Our US correspondent, James Matthews, reports on the rise and the dramatic fall of the man dubbed the Crypto King.
He was the financial whiz kid riding high on crypto success. He could hardly have fallen any further. Sam Bankman-Fried was jailed for 25 years. Prosecutors called him a megalomaniac with a brazen disrespect for the law.
Like I was saying, it's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
With big money ads.
I don't think so.
And big name endorsements.
Definitely not.
His FTX crypto exchange built a $26 billion fortune.
I'm not an expert, and I don't need to be.
It was an exchange where investors bought and sold virtual currency, like Bitcoin. And while the value of crypto soared, so did the company.
In less than 5 years, Sam Bankman-Fried went from buying his first Bitcoin.
But Bankman-Fried used investors' cash as a personal piggy bank.
You could buy Bitcoins in America, you could send them to Japan and sell them for Japanese yen.
With his financial formula, he built property in the Bahamas, endorsed sports stars, and put the company name on the Miami Heat stadium.
That's a lot of lives to save.
He was the dressed-down celebrity up to 25 on America's rich list, who bought into politics, courting the great and good of the Democratic Party and its like. The empire crashed when the value of crypto plummeted. Bankman-Fried used investor cash to plug gaps in one of his hedge funds, and customers lost $8 billion. He committed one of the biggest frauds in US history, one that raised questions over cryptocurrency itself.
The remarkable thing is that the crypto industry is back at record highs. I mean, Bitcoin is right back to where it was and even higher. But that hasn't really addressed, the fundamental issues around how something like FTX could have happened and how crypto institutions are supervised, whether crypto assets really have fundamental value and how they can be manipulated.
In court, Bankman-Fried said, "My useful life is probably over." For the playboy facing 25 years behind bars, it will be a life less lavish. James Matthews, Sky News, in Washington.
The UK has tonight announced a near doubling in aid for Sudan as the humanitarian crisis there continues to escalate. It's been nearly a year since Sudan's brutal civil war began, which has displaced millions. The latest conflict began last year when the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, launched a coup. The paramilitary force, led by its commander, known as Hemedti, had formerly been operated by the Sudanese government, but they are now fighting the government's own armed forces, led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Well, the RSF has taken control now of large swathes of Sudan, including most of the capital, Khartoum. The UN says more than 8 million people have been displaced since April, and at least 12,000 people have been killed. Analysis by Sky's data and forensics team has found that fire is being used as a tactic. There have been 180 separate incidents of settlements being targeted. South and West Darfur were the worst affected. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Bahir, has this report.
In Darfur, where there's smoke, there's usually fighting. And in some cases, the perpetrators make themselves known. Militiamen affiliated with the RSF, proudly filming their ambush with smoke rising in the back. Scorched earth tactics used in the Darfur conflict of the early 2000s, on display again. A team of investigators at the Center for Information Resilience have verified 180 individual fires that have impacted 108 villages since war broke out between the army and the RSF in mid-April 2023. An analysis by Sky's data and forensics team found that over a quarter had been targeted more than once.
There is a clear pattern that suggests that these fires are conflict-related. What we've also seen is that it's not just settlements being targeted, but there is also frequent fires at IDP camps, which would result in double displacement and people having to leave again.
Have you ever seen anything like this, Anouk?
But this scale, we haven't. I have personally not seen this before, which of course is difficult to quantify in that sense. Scorched earth tactics are not necessarily a new phenomenon, but the way that they are being rolled out is shocking.
Settlements in West and South Darfur have been the worst hit, with our analysis showing many were burnt again, even after the rapid support forces took control. Satellite images of Mistere in West Darfur appear to show most of the town being systematically destroyed by fire since October last year. But even before then, we watched from the border as fires ravaged the town and civilians fled gunfire. In North Darfur, the holdout state, there's an ongoing fight for power. And recent fires have been from army airstrikes. This one killed at least 9 people and left 12 families homeless. Nermat tells us they have no water, no food, and no place to live. She says they're gathered on the ash and burnt remains of their homes with nowhere to go, hoping for help. Just one example of the tragedies fueling the largest displacement crisis in the world. A single fire destroying a neighborhood, and a blaze of fires destroying a nation. Yusra El-Bahir, Sky News.
Well, we're going to stay in Africa, and 45 people have been killed in a bus crash in South Africa in the northern province of Limpopo. The driver lost control of the vehicle before it went over a bridge and hit the ground, bursting into flames. Well, Yusra El-Bahir joins us live for the latest, and there's aerial pictures, Yusra, showing just how precarious this bit of road could be.
Reports indicate, Anna, that the driver lost control of the vehicle as he was turning that curve in the bridge that you can see in the aerial pics, and then crashed nearly 50 meters into the mountainside. The rescue mission went on until the late hours of this evening. Some bodies were unrecognizable from the burns, some were buried under the rubble, but miraculously there was one survivor, an 8-year-old girl, who was taken to a nearby hospital to be treated for severe injuries and will soon have to deal with the reality that everyone she was traveling with has now died. Now, this isn't uncommon during Easter weekend. Last year, 252 people were killed in 207 roadside accidents. And even now, as we speak, people are flocking to the motorways to leave the cities and reunite with families around the country and the region. But in this case of this bus traveling to Maraya in Limpopo, where there is a massive church, the Zion Christian Church, to spend Easter weekend, the Easter holiday ended in tragedy before it even began.
Yusra, thank you. Now, points of agreement between Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson are few and far between. But today, the Labour leader said that the former Prime Minister had the right idea about levelling up across the country. That's where the consensus melted, however, as he went on to accuse Rishi Sunak of strangling the idea at birth when he was Chancellor. Sir Keir was launching Labour's campaign for May's local elections in Dudley. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, caught up with him there.
Future Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Step by step getting closer to power, and May's local elections an important marker.
We're looking to win in Dudley, looking to win in the West Midlands, right across the country.
The local election campaign launch all about the national story Keir Starmer wants to tell voters in this general election year.
The choice at these elections is exactly the same as it will be later this year. Stability with Labour or more chaos with the Tories.
So far ahead in the polls, expectations of this man and this May moment now huge. You're framing these elections as a national moment. Labour shooting up by hundreds of councillors and the Conservatives losing even more. Isn't anything short of that a sign you're not in landslide territory?
In order to get from where we landed in 2019 to even a 2 or 3 seat Labour majority will require a bigger swing than 1997. That's a sobering thought. That's why we've been disciplined, focused, changed the party, and are absolutely intent on putting our plan for Britain before Britain.
At the heart of that plan, a promise to give local leaders more powers to try to make levelling up work. You never much liked Boris Johnson, but you do seem to admire his vision to level up the country. If it weren't for Rishi Sunak, might Johnson have succeeded?
I think Rishi Sunak strangled levelling up at birth because he wouldn't put the funding behind it, and we know what the consequences are.
Devolution to give local communities more say, but no cash injection for struggling councils if he becomes PM. You told me I can't pretend we can turn on the taps, the spending taps. That's a no. You're not going to commit that money.
Well, I can't turn on the spending taps. At the end of an incoming Labour government, councils will be better funded, more sustainable and able to deliver their services than they are now.
That's 5 years away.
The first steps can be taken straight away. But, you know,
I'm asking you
councils...
about a cash injection. Yeah. Can you just... You're talking about 3-year funding settlements. To the viewer at home, does that mean an upfront cash injection?
What it means is not a lump sum cash injection.
The Conservatives defending their record even as they eye heavy local election losses.
Keir Starmer couldn't be more wrong. We are the party that's been leading on levelling up for years now. Labour are late to this game, and also they come with nothing new to say. No new money, no new powers, no plan at all.
What Starmer can sell the British people is the idea of change. But it's becoming clearer in this election year that when he says change, what he means is patience. His vision of Britain will take years to build. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Dudley.
Campaigners are warning that new hate crime laws in Scotland could be weaponised to settle scores. Legislation which comes into force on Monday criminalises threatening or abusive behaviour based on age, disability, sexual orientation and transgender identity. Here's our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis.
These were the warnings change was coming. Signs of a new system for tackling hate crime, a system swirling in controversy.
We've always had laws about stirring up hatred against people because of their racial background. Now the law has been expanded to include lots of other groups who are protected because of age, disability, sexuality, transgender and so on, have now got this charge that can be brought if people are threatening or abusive towards this person because they're part of that group and they're attempting to stir up hatred against that particular group.
This fish factory is one of dozens of sites where hate crimes can officially be reported. Others include a sex shop in Glasgow, branded progressive by some, draconian by others, including women's groups embroiled in the trans debate.
We know that there are people out there who have got lists of people that they are looking to target, that they are seeing this as an opportunity to settle scores.
This legislation is not going to catch people online saying things that I might disagree with, that you might disagree with. Freedom of expression is really important, and there's a defence for that within the legislation. What it does legislate against is when that freedom of speech strays into something that is abusive, that could cause fear and alarm, and that also incites hatred or incites people to act on that hatred.
This is partly controversial because police chiefs here in Scotland have committed to investigating each and every hate crime complaint at a time when there are major changes to law enforcement, with officers not investigating some minor crimes. A difficult contradiction.
And you have concerns that this will be weaponised? Yes, and that was not just my words, but the words of the Association of Police Superintendents in Scotland. They have concerns that some individuals will use this new law here in Scotland to weaponise others, and they will be forced to police the thinking of members of the public.
The next item of business is First Minister's questions.
The UK government's branded it woke, but the First Minister's rejected claims it'll have a chilling effect.
I have absolute faith in police's ability to weed out vexatious complaints. They unfortunately have to deal with vexatious complaints that cause a whole range of legal matters.
It's clear these laws are polarising. Yet another example of how debate has become trapped in entrenched positions that are now all too familiar in Scotland. Conor Gillis, Sky News.
A man in his 40s has been arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. That's after Gogglebox star George Gilby died following an accident at work yesterday. The reality star appeared on the Channel 4 series alongside his mother, Linda McGarry, and stepfather, Pete McGarry. Film director Christopher Nolan and his wife, film producer Emma Thomas, are to receive a knighthood and damehood in recognition of their services to film. It comes after their biopic, Oppenheimer, cleaned up across the awards season, taking home 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. The Queen has deputised for the King at the historic Royal Maundy service, handing out the purses of Maundy money to 150 community stalwarts in recognition of their service. The King, who is undergoing cancer treatment, was unable to attend, instead sending an audio message.
It is for me a great sadness that I cannot be with you all today. The Maundy service has a very special place in my heart. We need and benefit greatly from those who extend the hand of friendship to us, especially in a time of need.
A Sky News investigation has found that our growing appetite for data and AI is putting water and energy supplies at risk. With global electricity demand forecast to double by 2026, billions of litres of water will be needed to cool computer servers around the world. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, gained access to a centre in Slough, the second largest data hub on the planet.
Believe it or not, Slough is Europe's largest data hub, the second largest in the world. These anonymous buildings are data centres, handling the vast majority of the world's internet traffic.
So why are we restricted in what we can see and can't see here?
Yeah, I mean, customer security is our top priority.
It's rare for us to be inside one. Data centres are now critical infrastructure and ruthlessly competitive. The condition of access here is that we don't film any customers' servers.
You know, what you'll notice here is lots of cables. And what that means is this is where the internet all connects.
Data demand is booming, and with big tech firms racing to train insanely data-hungry AI models, so are their energy needs.
Not only do they need a lot of power to run, they also need a lot of power to cool. They generate a lot of excess heat, and right now cold air is being pumped through these vents in the floor of this data centre to carry that heat away. And for an industry that's forecast to grow 34% a year for the next 5 years at least, that's a challenge, because all of that power has to come from somewhere. The International Energy Agency forecasts energy demand from data increasing in all regions of the world, doubling by 2026. In Ireland, it expects data centres to consume nearly a third of all the country's electricity within 2 years. There are 82 data centres in Europe's low-tax tech hub, the vast majority clustered around Dublin. In Ireland, there have been concerns about blackouts, and in arid parts of the world, because of all that cooling, protests over data's water demand coming before thirsty people.
there isn't a great deal of transparency from the big tech companies themselves around energy consumption or water use. So most of these are estimates. One estimate for every typical user interaction with ChatGPT, the data server would use the equivalent of 500 milliliter bottle of water. And that's a single user interaction.
Regulators in Europe and the US are demanding more transparency and efficiency. Here, next to an Amazon data centre in Dublin, is a district heating scheme that uses waste heat from the data centre to warm nearby homes and businesses. More schemes like this would help, but given the demand for resources, especially of AI, big tech faces some big questions about what society gets in return for their race for data supremacy. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the columnist and broadcaster, Steve Richards, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Salma Shah. Welcome to both of you. And certainly among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front page of The Eye. Its headline for the paper: taxpayers may be forced to bail out Thames Water as customers face a 40% hike in their bills. That and plenty more, of course, when we come back. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories. The boss of Thames Water has warned that bills could rise by 40% as the company tries to stay afloat. Sky News has seen evidence that more than £1 million of unexplained transactions were transferred into a post office account at the height of the Horizon scandal. And Sam Bankman-Fried, known as the king of crypto, has been sentenced to 25 years in prison for one of the biggest financial frauds in US history. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see then what is making the headlines with the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah with us from now until just before midnight. So welcome to both of you. To the front pages then, let us kick off with the Eye, leading with the Thames Water saga. Its headline reads, taxpayers may be forced to bail out Thames Water as customers face a 40% hike in their bills. The Express, also about Thames Water, it says disgrace, fat cat water bosses under fire, reporting the company now needs a taxpayer bailout after shareholders refused to pour in £500 million. The Times is leading with the same story, reporting on the government's message to Thames Water that it must not hit consumers with bill hikes. The Telegraph reports the Prime Minister is under fire after a surprise Easter list hands a knighthood to a donor who gave £5 million to the Tory party. Rayner on the ropes is the Mail's headline, a report on the increasing pressure for Angela Rayner to release more financial and legal details about the council house she sold a decade ago. The food crisis in Gaza makes the front of The Guardian, reporting on the UN court order for Israel to unblock Gaza aid. Daily Mirror reporting on a proposed law to help protect entertainment venues from terror attacks. It's being championed by the mother of a Manchester arena bombing victim. The Sun is reporting on the arrest of George Gilby's work colleague after the Gogglebox star fell to his death in a warehouse. And the full Nelson, that's the headline on the front of the Star, for a story about Storm Nelson, which is set to bring, or I think already has, brought snow, sleet, rain and high winds this Easter long weekend. Nelson did seem a strange name, though, did it not? Anyway, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to them, to Steve and to Salma. Lots of coverage about Thames Water, not surprisingly, because what is the inevitable result of the financial difficulties they had if they can't raise bills as they would like to, Salma?
Yes, this is interesting because there's lots of different aspects to this. So on the front of the Eye, you have the chief of the water company talking about the need for bills to rise in order to probably pay for these debts. Whether that's just about him or other water companies, I'm unsure. But what's interesting is that the other parts of the stories are linking back to potentially nationalising this business. And most people think that that is an inevitability. But Jacob Rees-Mogg has tweeted this evening saying that actually, in a capitalist process, you go to administrators. And I think there is a missing piece of the puzzle in terms of the reporting, that it's jumping from not getting investment into gosh, the government's going to have to nationalise this entity, and missing a big part of the middle where actually administrators could be called in to run this business.
Well, the middle part of the puzzle might be the fact that the CEO told Ian King today, for example, that they still have £2.4 billion worth of liquidity, which is enough to see us through until May 2025. So perhaps, in his view, the urgency will come in a year's time if they still need to do all this investment, which, as he said, the public is demanding, which is into the billions, obviously.
Yeah, and the public are absolutely right to make those demands. There's so many interesting stories around tonight, you know, on the edge of an Easter weekend. The story you've been running about the post office, and this one is about how you deliver public services, how you hold the people to account who run them. And in the mid-'80s, the state monopolies were switched to private monopolies when it comes to water. And it's been a disaster. We haven't had the investment. We can't get the investment now. The shareholders are saying
do you think it has been a disaster across the board? I mean, the great, Thatcher sell-off of, the little owners owning all these great companies.
Where you can get competition, it works.
Okay.
But where you privatise one monopoly and replace it with another monopoly, regulation has not been able to do the equivalent of a kind of market competition thing. And it has been a complete disaster. And, you know, this weekend people want to go and walk by rivers and so, well, they won't be swimming because it'll be too cold. But, and this great asset has been, and it does need big investment. But it hasn't been made. The shareholders won't make it.
It was privatised in 1989. In subsequent years, I mean, it hasn't been a complete disaster. I think one of the things that we have to do is review and understand what has happened here, which has forced underinvestment. Let's think about, actually, you're right, on utilities and provisions that actually people depend on. Is there a different type of regulation that government can put on private companies, as we have in housing, to protect social housing assets? Is there a way that you could do that with public entities and utilities, private companies that provide public services? I think that is an important step before we say that the whole thing was a disaster.
Well, so far, I think we can say that these markets which don't work because they're not markets, I do think it's been a disaster. I agree with you. It's worth exploring possible new regulatory frameworks. But it's not clear, even if you do that, where the money's going to come from. Because the government is saying they can't put up the bills because it will be a huge hit to people in the midst of this so-called cost of living crisis. So where's the money going to come from through better regulation? I mean, maybe it could be delivered more effectively. But even so, how do you hold these people to account effectively when they run a monopoly?
Well, this is the thing. One of the things that you have to ask is, what was given to the shareholders? What did the shareholders take out?
But they say they've not had dividends for years, though, to be fair to, to Thames Water. But yes, that's the point. But, then you have to remember that actually it's our pension pots that also are part of the shareholders.
Part of their contribution to this. So what's actually happened, and does that structure work? And
or have we got a Victorian water system, as many people have suggested, which does need a lot of investment? Michael Gove, quoted in the bottom of the eye there, the Levelling Up Secretary rejected suggestions of higher bills, insisting that Thames Water's bosses had to carry the can for its predicament. But how do you carry the can if you don't have the dosh, effectively? Exactly. The Guardian says Thames Water is on track for renationalisation. Is that the inevitability, then, do you think, Steve?
Well, I can't see any other route, but I'm fully aware that that doesn't in itself explain where the money's going to come from. That because governments are broke as well and haven't got that much money. But I think there would be a way of publicly owned companies running things far more efficiently with clear lines of accountability that's been lost with these privatised monopolies. I'm not saying it was a sort of oasis of brilliance pre-privatisation, but I do think there's a model that would be more effective than this. The resources to pay for what needs to be done is an immediate issue. And it's not clear because the government doesn't want to find the money. The taxpayers don't and the shareholders don't. But something's got to be done because these rivers and seas are being ruined.
Daily Express talks about the fat cat water bosses, quoting the salary. I presume for Thames Water it's cut off, but I presume it's the Chris Weston, the chief executive of Thames Water, who says he's fairly new to the business. I mean, it's a hospital pass, isn't it, taking over a business with debts like this, to be fair. But he was suggesting they need £20 billion between 2025 to 30, which would then lead to that increase of 40%, because customers are demanding, one, brilliantly clean drinking water, and two, environmental changes, which is the stuff you're talking about the sewage outflows and everything.
Yeah, and it's not much to ask, to be honest. I mean, it is expensive. And we need a grown-up debate about how we pay for it. But in a way, this fat cat stuff, that's the easy bit. You don't give them their bonuses and things. That still doesn't answer the question about delivery, accountability, effectiveness. Now, changes in regulation might do it, but I suspect a modern publicly owned company will end up being the route.
I think just to make one final point, the headline here is actually very difficult for people in business because fat cat bosses, the salary is £850,000 a year, which is enormous, absolutely. But this is a mammoth task, and to try and attract people who are going to take this on, they do have to have the correct remuneration. And I know that's not going to be popular, but if we're going to ask talented people to come in and fix these problems, then the remuneration has to be correct. And it is a private company at the end of the day.
But they have to be talented.
Yes.
So, when I remember the London Underground, they brought in a load of people from New York, and they really made a huge difference. And it was worth paying every halfpenny, however much it cost. This lot, to justify £850,000, have to really rise to the challenges, and there's not much evidence.
And it's worth noting it is not globally typical to have a privatised utility company known as Water, which is what we need.
Yeah.
Should we move on to the Daily Telegraph? A couple of stories on the front there, one of which is an honours row. Now, first of all, what is this honour? It doesn't seem to be a New Year honour or a birthday honour. Why has it been given, and who is calling the furore on the front of the Telegraph?
So, yes, you're right. So normally you have the New Year's honours, the monarch's birthday honours and dissolution honours. So it is unclear to me even now, having read these stories, as to which of those bits it fits into, although it might create some speculation, as Steve and I were discussing earlier, as to whether this might be dissolution honours. But there has been some issue with a Conservative Party donor who gave the party £5 million last year, who's been awarded a knighthood. And so there have been demands from Labour previously about this donor, asking for the Conservatives to return the money. I don't know what the logic is behind that, but it certainly created some issues for Rishi Sunak. Alongside this, you've got MPs who've been given gongs as well. Yeah. Philip Davies, one, Mark Spencer another, and Tracy Crouch has been given a damehood. And inevitably there are questions about, the gongs that are going to MPs and those who are retiring as well. So it's not been the best round, I'm afraid.
Yes, the businessman is Mohammed Mansour. He is listed as his Knights Bachelor. I've got it here. Businessman, philanthropist and senior treasurer of the Conservative Party for Business, Charity and Political Service. But the £5 million makes it look like patronage is the problem. But the Telegraph is suggesting, what does this lead to in terms of when Rishi Sunak might go to the polls then, Steve?
Yeah, well, in effect, they're sort of saying that one possibility is he's fully aware that he's running out of time, because there might be, who knows, a June-July election. But even in October, he's beginning to feel that time is running out for him to dole out honours to the people one way or another who he considers to be worthy of them. So it's not part of any of the normal formal honours announcements. It's part of this, to be honest, a fin de siècle feel at the moment, that we're moving very fast towards an end.
I can see the strap now, fin de siècle.
Yes, fin de siècle. I always pronounce it wrong, fin de siècle. But, this issue keeps on coming, doesn't it? Donations, knighthoods and so on. I mean, I think you've got to have state funding of these parties. It's just not going to go away as an issue.
I don't think you should have state funding of the parties, but I definitely think that people should review and be a little bit more transparent on the process around honours. And, people that we think that are worthy, and not just the great and the good, but actually people who go out there and do charitable work, I think they're more worthy of knighthoods and damehoods.
Yeah.
That's another big debate, isn't it? We've got more Tory news to come, but also ahead in the press preview, does Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner have questions to answer over her property dealings?
This will require mountaineering skills. Beaks come in useful as ice picks. And tobogganing is a quick way down.
Well, I have the pleasure of curating them for this album that Dolby commissioned, 7 Sonic Wonders. And so I wanted to include sounds from across the planet, from a glacier in Iceland right down to the sounds of a frog chorus in the tropical parts of Panama, but also sounds closer to home, starlings, a great murmuration of birds, the Ring Angels track. So it was difficult to choose 7 tracks, but I wanted to give a sort of wide geographical range, and also sounds that I just found astonishing, as well as sounds that we need to consider as regards protecting the habitats in which they happen.
That's amazing. Chris, tell us more about the whale sounds.
Well, I think that they're humpback whales and they're singing on their migration route down the North Atlantic to the Silver Bank. And what I found fascinating about that is that not only the songs of the whales themselves, but the acoustic of their environment. I heard for the first time this remarkable cathedral-like space around the whales. And that's something I wanted to include, and that's the thing that Dolby Atmos does. It spatializes the sound so I can take the listener to where my microphones, or hydrophones were in this case, when I made the recordings. Not just conventional microphones like the ones that we're using now, but also for the whales, underwater microphones, which are called hydrophones. And sometimes I'm really interested in putting, like the microphones I'm wearing now, and you've got on, these tiny personal microphones. And I often think there are much more interesting places to put those microphones other than on people sometimes, because it allows you to get them into these magical spaces and tune into the natural world in a way that we rarely get the opportunity of hearing.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview. We are joined once again by Steve Richards and Sal Marshall. Welcome back to both of you. Back to the Daily Telegraph. One of the more right-wing elements of the Conservative Party has come out and actually been secretly recorded, one presumes, saying that actually criticisms by Reform of the Tories are fundamentally correct, fascinatingly.
Yes, this is Danny Kruger MP, who is the co-chairman of the New Conservatives, which is one of the many factions in the Conservative Party that doesn't seem to like Rishi Sunak very much. But this is a recording of him essentially talking about reform, hitting the right buttons, and the Conservative Party no longer being conservative. It's one of those refrains that you hear quite frequently. Gosh, if we were much more conservative. And of course, it's on the front page of the Telegraph. That is the Conservative Party parish rag, I would describe it as. But what's interesting about this is that clearly the sort of naysayers in the Conservative Party against Rishi Sunak are not being dampened or quelled. In fact, they're finding new routes and new ways to be able to talk about the fact that...
And recording each other.
To talk about how reform, if we were just a little bit more like Reform, perhaps we'd be better in the polls. So there's a lot more of this push, I think, to come.
Yeah, and in the meantime, the Daily Mail, still after Angela Rayner, on the ropes, the paper says now, after what's been dubbed Council Housegate now, is it, Steve?
It reminds me, I'm not saying the outcome will be the same, I don't know, but it reminds me of the pursuit they had with Keir Starmer when the Durham police investigation went into whether they put him on the front page every day for days and days and kept the thing going until it stopped when the police said he didn't break the COVID laws.
Oh, because he was filmed, wasn't he, drinking a beer in an office?
Yeah, and it was just on the front page of the Mail every day. Now, maybe this will prove to be different, but I think the most interesting thing is Keir Starmer, who can be very, very cautious, as we all know, and can equivocate if he feels the need to equivocate, has been unqualified in his support for Angela Rayner in this issue. And, you could find a form of words that leave us the door slightly open, that the Mail are onto something, and he hasn't.
But is the Mail onto the fact that she is seen as a weak link, partly because she's left-leaning and therefore sort of splits that centrist message that Keir Starmer's trying to to get at, do you think? Is that why she's in the spotlight?
I think she will be a target, even if this goes nowhere.
Okay.
I think she will continue to be a target unfairly, probably.
Yeah. Now, it's rained forever, as we all know, but the Star has decided to pick up on the fact that it's snowing, which actually feels different at last, doesn't it? Snow, sleet, rain, the full Nelson. This is Storm Nelson. Got some pictures from Devon, actually, where it has been, well, I don't know if it's unseasonable or not, but anyway, it's been cold, hasn't it? There we go.
Wow.
Snow falling in Devon, as you can see on the streets. Happy Easter, as everybody's saying. Oh, dear, as far as I'm concerned, anything that breaks from the rain is a good thing. But anyway, Sal.
Yeah, so the thing I find really interesting about this is the Star, a red-top newspaper, is essentially covering what is a story about, to me, climate change. So it is telling its readers that this is not only something that's going to hamper their enjoyment on the bank holiday weekend, but also, you know, it is one of the wettest years that we've had on record. And the fact is that this is not normal. So kudos to the Star for doing this story in a way that I think is much more accessible than most climate change stories.
Well, the Met Office says more snowfall and sleet overnight, issued a yellow weather warning for wind for parts of Somerset and Dorset.
It's Easter.
See you in a bit. It's
People
Easter.
4 days off and looking forward to that guy there, you know, deck chair.
I've got to get to the forecast.
And you've got to do the forecast. Makes it even more miserable.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
A glimmer of hope. The Easter weekend will be milder, but still some showers, which will be heavy and widespread tomorrow. A scattering of showers to start the day then. Central parts will be mostly dry and chilly, with patches of frost and fog possible in Northern Ireland. More general rain will affect the far north of Scotland. That rain will largely clear through the morning, while blustery showers develop widely elsewhere, but there will be sunny spells too. The showers will be heavy in places with the risk of hail and thunder. Some parts of northeast England will stay dry, milder and less windy than today. The afternoon will bring further blustery showers. Southeast England, Southeast Ireland will become mainly dry later.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.